The impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Benton. It is vampires. It's a host of damned souls of telepaths.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
He's dead. Can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hi everybody, this is Irene Allen Block, the host of the Paranormal UK Radio show, the flagship show of the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And I'm here tonight with my co-host, Mark Johnson.
Hello.
I always remember your name now, just can't remember my own.
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to be at that stage in the near future too. It's all inevitable.
Wait until you get your pension and then you can be like me. Okay, I am sorry, everybody. I've got a funny throat tonight, so Mark is going to be taking the show. Plus, we'll be talking about a topic that I'm not that up on at the moment.
Well, I think you're going to learn a lot about it. So
yes, by listening, I can learn a lot. But my throat is very, very wobbly tonight. So, anyway, how are you, Mark?
Doing fine as can be, with everything, going on. We've had, fall is here in full bloom. All of our leaves are turning.
Oh,
it's
we were sweeping them up today.
Yeah, it's gorgeous here.
What we were doing, I was raking the moss off the lawn at the front of the house, and Brian was sweeping up all the leaves from the tree, and then he was wheelbarrowing them through to the back and putting them on the flower beds at the back.
Huh.
All the dead leaves, because it's mulch. The mulch rots down. It's good for the plants.
Yep, definitely.
Well, so we used to bag them all up, then keep them for a year until they rotted right down, then put them on the garden. But now we're just chucking them on the garden, on the flower beds, and it's working.
As long as you're saving the wine grapes.
Ah, yes. Now, winemaking is in 2 weeks' time. I should be doing it now, but I've put it off as long as I can because my 2 grandchildren are coming down, my 2 grandsons, and it's their first experience of making all the wine.
You still owe me a bottle.
I owe you a few bottles, don't I?
Yeah, definitely. And,
Mark, this is the only wine I can drink because of being allergic to alcohol, right? This homemade wine that we make, there's no additives or no preservatives in it or anything that make me sneeze. So, and you don't get a hangover with it, Mark.
Do you even get tipsy with it? Is there any alcohol in it?
Yeah. You can get tiddly on it, but I'll tell you, you don't wake up the following morning with a banging hangover. Well, it's fantastic.
Well, that's a good thing. Again, I'm going to have to try a bottle here someday.
Yeah. I'll send some over.
I've been drinking a little bit too much wine lately. When there's not much else to do, go get a bottle, sit around, watch TV.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah. Plus,
it's nice to have a drop of wine. But when we ran out, well, we haven't quite run out of the. We're on. The bottles we're on at the moment are 8 years old. But, we ran out of the red and we've only got the white left. So, and I prefer the red.
Me too. I like dry reds myself.
Yeah?
Yep. And I never used to be a wine drinker at all, only in the last couple of years.
Well, I tell you what, I am becoming quite a connoisseur with our wines. And I'm beginning to think now, especially with the white wines, I'm thinking of adding stuff in, like maybe some fruit or something, you know, you can buy them in the shops. So why not try it? Just see how it goes.
That would be nice. What I always joke about is, you know, my wife got me into wine and I got her into beer. Now she craves beer and she goes, I can't believe I crave beer. I used to only drink wine. It's like, well, welcome to the club. But now I crave red wine. So give me a good Cabernet and I'm a happy camper.
Yeah. Well, every summer, you know, the only beer I can drink is Italian beers. And, they're the only ones I like because they remind me of Italy. And if it's really hot day, I like to have one in the garden. But I have to take an antihistamine first, at least half an hour before, because otherwise it's just like, it's exactly the same symptoms as hay fever. It doesn't matter what time of the year it is. If I drink something with additives in, right, my eyes stream, my nose runs, I sneeze, I can't breathe. So I have to take an antihistamine. But, you know, Italian beers are the best. Let's face it.
I like a good Peroni once in a while when it's hot out.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Well, why don't we go ahead and let's get on with the show. Really excited to introduce our guest for tonight. He's actually appeared on this show many, many, many times over the years, and we always love having him back. We want to welcome Nick Redfern to the program. How are you tonight, Nick?
Hey, guys. I'm doing good, thanks.
Hello, Nick. Nick, I'm leaving you in safe hands of Mark tonight.
Well, you should...
Because I am having trouble talking.
Well, you should also chime in if you have something.
Oh, I will. You know me. I can't keep quiet for long. So if I've got something to say, I will say.
Oh, yeah, you do.
But, yeah.
So
it's very difficult to talk at the moment.
Yep.
Well, at least you got your wine. That's good.
Yeah. No, I've got milk, actually. But then again, I'm allergic to milk too. Nick, I have to have lacto-free milk. Because and I love milk, but I can't drink ordinary milk anymore. So that's what I'm drinking tonight, milk.
Well,
so, off you go.
Nick, I imagine that during these last several months, you've had plenty of time to get all your writing in for the year.
Well, not all of it, but I'm getting there. But you're right. I mean, it's one of those situations we're all kind of in right now, you know, where, I mean, you can go outside if it's, you know, you want to risk your health, which I don't particularly want to do, you know. But the way I look at it, we got to do what we got to do, you know. So it is what it is right now, and I guess we see.
You know, Nick,
how the months go ahead. I don't know.
Nick, the last time you came on, I was in the middle of writing a spy book. Okay?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was in the middle of... Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No.
Yes. Semi-novel.
Yeah. Yes. One of them. And I was in the middle of doing it. I'm still doing it now.
Oh, wow.
So it shows you how fast I write compared to you. You turn out a book. It seems like you turn out a book a week compared to me.
Well, the way I look at it is that, you know, it's the primary important thing is what the book comes out like, you know, whether you do it in 3 months or a year, as long as when you got it finished and it's all cool and, you know, you're happy with it, that's the way I look at it. That's how, you know, it should be. It doesn't really matter the amount of time, really. So. Unless, of course, you've got an editor screaming at you.
Well, plus, I imagine you're writing several books at a time, jumping from one to another.
But you see, Nick, my books are about spies, secrets, and sex, and it's the last thing, the last bit, the sex. It's trying to remember it. At my age, you know, it's difficult. So there you go. That's why it's taking so long.
Yeah, you know, you need to talk to your husband about that.
Can't remember either.
Okay, and on that note, Nick, we're talking to you tonight about your latest book, The Martians. And
I thought we were talking about beer.
Oh, yeah. Well, we can also talk about beer, too, while we're at it. Lots of good beer stories there. But you know what? I have to tell you, I haven't had a chance to read your book yet. I'm picking it up, but because this is a subject, I don't know why. I can't explain it. I've always been fascinated with Mars. And everything about it, even with the modern movies, like they had, the movie The Martian, which I thought was excellent, with that Ridley Scott had made a couple years ago, and now they're making a bunch of other series about going to Mars, and Mars is like in the forefront of everything, but there's always these questions about Mars. And now, we have NASA sending probes since the 70s and rovers, and we're photographing the surface, and they tell us that, it's just a dry rock with no running water, no atmosphere hardly, and yet that's not all quite true. And based on from what I'm seeing on your book, you've pulled up a lot of questions about what the true history of Mars really should be like. What made you want to write about Mars to begin with?
Well, I think more than anything else, Mars is known for its anomalies, as I call them. You look at some worlds that we think, probably are dead, like, for example, Mercury, which is probably just, a sort of a fire-blasted piece of rock, But, and we're sort of now seeing stories about potential life on Venus. But what intrigues me so much about Mars is the, this sort of collective body of material that suggests there may well have been some sort of intelligent life forms on Mars a long, long time ago, and possibly even some sort of examples still alive to this day. So what I basically did with the book was to look at all the various data and the mysteries and the photographs, which show some really weird and strange images, and make a case for the possibility that Mars at one point may have been sort of a teeming world, perhaps not too dissimilar to ours, possibly hundreds of thousands of years ago, but also with some kind of life on Mars to this day, sort of I guess, try and stay alive, if you like, against all the odds. So I think, when you put the whole story together, what you have is sort of a really strange and bizarre story of a world that is sort of on an edge, but we think is completely dead when I don't think it actually is.
Mars is probably the one planet in the solar system most capable of having some form of life, especially in the past, where they do feel that it was a lot warmer, had a thicker atmosphere. You listen to the science programs, and I used to watch all the programs from, Carl Sagan's Cosmos, which really got me first intrigued by Mars, to, there was the Universe show, all these other different shows about Mars. And they talk about how it once had a thicker atmosphere, but because it doesn't have a magnetic field, the solar winds blew away the atmosphere. And there's a lot of things that science tries to tell us, and I have to say, it doesn't ring right with me. There's a lot of things, not only that come from NASA and from their recent, orbiters and rovers, and what they try to tell us about Mars, and there's things that just don't quite make sense to me. And that's why I was looking forward to talking with you a little bit more in your research on what you found about Mars. Now, part of the questions that your book asks is like, was there intelligent life on Mars? And, back from the 70s, and the first probes going around Mars taking pictures of the area of Cydonia, that they call it, where there's supposedly the facial structure there. Yeah. And I know, what was his name? Richard Good Lord.
Hoagland.
Yes.
Hoagland.
Yes, Rich Hoagland, who's on Art Bell's Coast to Coast many, many, many times talking about Mars and the face. And NASA's tried to debunk that with later photos which show this weird, just like all Cragley Mountain range, say, see, this is an illusion. And yet what they failed to explain is if you look around that mountain face, it has a perfectly artificial outline that doesn't look natural at all. So,
well, you're right, and that's one of the most important aspects of this story, and it largely began in 1975 when one of the NASA probes photographed one particular area of Mars called Cydonia. And Cydonia is the area where we have this famous or infamous, what looks like a carved head looking out from the ground up to the sky above. And the area is an interesting place because not only does it have the so-called face on Mars in that area of Cydonia, but there are also what appear to be eerily like very damaged pyramids, but still pyramids. And so, of course, you've got a couple of situations like that. Now, everybody, I think, who's had an interest in subjects like this, even superficially, have heard of the face on Mars. But there's actually, it's not the only one. There's actually two other images that appear to show what look like human faces. Now, one of them is known as the crowned face, and if you do a Google Images search on crowned face Mars, you'll see a picture taken by NASA, which is sort of a really incredible picture. It actually looks like a crown sitting on a head with two eyes. And the right-hand eye, if you look at it, it even looks like it's got a pupil. Below that, there's a nose with two nostrils, lips, and a jawline. And it's very difficult to reconcile that with just, something created randomly by nature. And there's also another one, which is even more controversial, which is like a side-on, looks like a side-on carving of one of the most sort of famous characters in ancient Egyptian culture, Nefertiti. And if you look at a picture of Nefertiti and then you Google Mars Nefertiti photograph, you'll see something that eerily parallels Nefertiti, as I said. And so the intriguing thing in all this is that there seems to be parallels between various aspects of Egypt, or similar to issues on Egypt, but what we're seeing them on Mars. We've got the pharaoh kind of imagery, Nefertiti. We've got the face and the Sphinx-like situations. So you put all that together and you see what I believe to be the final remnants, if you like, of a ravaged and destroyed civilization a very long time ago. But some of these structures were, huge in nature, and so they've survived to some degree, which would be the same case, if we went to sort of like a third world war. There would be some buildings, obviously, that would survive, whereas a lot wouldn't, but in relation to all of these various, sort of carvings or however you want to call them, I mean, it's one of these situations where when you look at it collectively, and that's the important thing, most people just focus on the face on Mars and think, well, it's just a random thing. Again, that's not the case. We're seeing multiple photographs from all across the planet. And one of the most interesting ones that I talk about in the book is a photograph, that was taken by NASA, not by one of its orbiting craft, but actually one of the rovers. And it seems to show what looks like, and I'm not joking here, it looks like a sort of a cross between a huge crab and a huge spider crawling up the side of a wall of a cave. And even NASA have sort of not ignored this, and they kind of go along with what people like me refer to it, and people call it the creature off the Alien movies.
A face hugger. Yeah.
Yeah. And even NASA refer to it as the face hugger, but they believe it's just a case of, the sun and shadows and things like that. But I don't think that is the case. Again, if you Google face hugger photo Mars, you'll see what looks like this circular creature with this sort of 8 limbs coming from it and what looks like a head at the top or the bottom, depending which way it's going. And it's very difficult to explain that away as a piece of rock. It doesn't look like rock at all. It really does look like some sort of, I guess, appropriately alien-looking weird creature. And the interesting thing is, a lot of these pictures are actually in the public domain. The only reason we have them is because NASA has given them to us. It's not like we've had to fight for them and they've been hidden. So this has given rise in some quarters to the idea that NASA has deliberately started to release these as a means towards some degree of disclosure.
It's possible. I mean, I know that they dismiss a lot. The official NASA line is on any of these photos where it appears like there's anomalies. And I was just looking at the face hugger crab-like photo, and that is definitely, if that's a natural formation, it's very odd.
It is.
But they just explain it off. It's like pareidolia. You're looking at things. You're trying to put human-like features to rock formations and whatnot. But, you notice I was also looking at the Nefertiti one that you mentioned, and that one in particular reminds me of, there's a Google Earth image of what looks like a Native American's head, and I think it was somewhere up in Canada, the Badlands, that it was taken high above from the satellite view, which looks almost identical to that in a lot of ways. So it's interesting that there's that type of imagery both on Earth and Mars, which a lot of people seem to think that there is a connection. But let's talk about all the photos. Now, there are entire websites out there dedicated to people poring over every single picture that the rovers take and finding anomalies on Mars. And people have found everything that they've claimed are like coffins, spaceships, or whatnot. There's the one that looks like a Bigfoot walking along. The ridgeline was one of the first ones that I saw, which they try to explain away, but I look at that damn thing and I'm going, that looks alive to me. I mean, it doesn't look like a rock. So
well, there's a lot of controversy about that. Is it what it actually shows? And when you look at the picture, it's an interesting picture. But one of the things that was left out of a lot of the stories, the media stories, and this probably was done because it kind of takes some of the sensationalism away from it, is that actually it's a small figure actually photographed at a close level rather than vice versa. It's actually not like a 6 foot tall thing about quarter of a mile away or something like that. It's actually only about 5 or 6 inches right in front of the rover. Because in the expanded picture, you can actually see part of the rover next to it, and then you kind of get the sense of sort of appreciating the size or the lack of size. But even if it's just a strange, like a little statue or something, it does look human. That's an important thing to note.
Well, and that's part of the problem with these pictures, is trying to get a size perspective on what you're looking at.
Yeah.
A lot of times you can't tell. There's another famous photo that I find very intriguing, which looks like a woman, a human-like figure, standing on a rock face. And it looks like a humanoid person. It doesn't look like a rock outcropping at all. But, you know, with what it looks like, you're seeing somebody a long way away, but then again, there's no perspective from the photo. So are you seeing something just a few feet away? You can't tell.
No, you're right, and some of that is just due to the fact that, you know, the rover itself is limited, you know, and it takes a bunch of pictures here and there, and, you know, the logistics of sort of going back and forward again to try and take another image of A, B, or C. You know, they try and not to sort of go back and forth and get in multiple pictures of the same thing because, you know, they're limited, and so that's why, you know, they try and get as many pictures of different things as possible, you know. So that's why some of these anomalies, there's only, say, one or two pictures of them because they're busy trying to, you know, get other pictures in different parts of Mars as well. But I mean, but you're right, when it looks at some of these pictures, you know, perspective in some cases is an angle. But on the other hand, you know, there are some pictures also that it really is difficult, you know, to dismiss them. Not just like the facehugger or the crowned king, as it's been known, but, you know, you've got other examples as well. I mean, one of them is in relation to what are called the Banyan Trees, Banyan. And again, if you Google Mars Banyan Trees, you'll see these very weird-looking, what look like bushes or trees. They've actually been photographed by one of the orbiters. So you're actually looking down at these, what look like trees or bushes. It kind of looks like, you know, if you're sort of looking out the window of an aeroplane flying over Arizona or something like that and seeing some really strange trees. That's really what it looks like. Now, NASA writes this off as simply Martian, basically sort of ice particles. But if you look at these pictures of the so-called Martian banyan trees, they don't really look like ice particles to me. They kind of look like, or very much look like, small round trees sticking out of the desert environment. And appropriately, you know, they don't look anything like our trees or bushes, but that is actually what they look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, while we're talking, I'm Googling and I'm looking at these pictures, and I totally agree, especially when you're seeing some of the pictures taken from high above from the orbiter. But even the rovers, I'll tell you which photos really interest me. There are several photos taken of the rover showing the horizon, and you see the sky, and you might even see the sun, and then all of a sudden, there's an object up in the sky. It's like, wait a minute. There's not supposed to be anything up there. There's no birds. There's no planes. And yet, clear as day, I've seen about 3 or 4 different pictures of, I hate to call them UFOs, but that's what they are. There's some types of unidentified objects up in the sky in these photos from the rover. So,
are you talking about those shiny ones in the distance?
There's even there's some shiny ones and there's some dark ones. Yeah, there's a couple of different types, and some look like typical UFO photos that are taken here on Earth. The fact is that it's a completely clear sky, and yet there is a black or shaded object in the sky up above. It looks far away. Could be a mile or more away. And but it shouldn't be there because there's nothing around that should be in the air.
You're right. Yeah, that's just another example of all this. And you know, one of the other interesting angles is, of course, NASA writes all this off. But one of the sort of most intriguing things that I talk about in the book is investigations into Mars by a completely different agency. And at the time, NASA didn't even know about this, and that was in relation to the CIA. Now, in the early 1970s, the CIA set up their remote viewing programs, and I'm sure most of your listeners know about remote viewing, but if not, it's a way and means to sort of use your mind to project it into the past and different locations, and basically psychic spying, and that's what it was used for primarily in the Cold War, to sort of spy on the Russians and the Chinese, etc., but using the power of the mind to pick up the imagery that they're looking for. And what a lot of people don't know is that on May the 22nd, 1984, and we know the date because the files have now been declassified through the Freedom of Information Act, but on May the 22nd, 1984, the CIA initiated a top-secret remote viewing of Mars. And the primary remote viewer, we know now that there actually were several more, but the primary remote viewer said they could see back, or they went back, if you like, to an extensive amount of time. We're talking close to like 1 million years ago. And the remote viewer said they could see Mars in sort of like worldwide turmoil, that the atmosphere was sort of like semi on fire. There were huge earthquakes. Asteroids were sort of blasting down to the ground. And as well as that, they could see these very eerily human-looking extraterrestrials that looked extremely like us, but they were very, very tall. We're talking about sort of 10 to 12 feet tall. And they were sort of in a state of complete panic, trying to find ways to survive. And one of the remote viewers said they could see the Martians fleeing into these deep, massive underground facilities that had been built, presumably because, this had happened before, or it was perceived it was going to happen. And so they were building sort of emergency underground facilities. And what's perhaps most notable about this is that NASA had no clue that this was going on. So in other words, we're getting all this data from Mars, and not even NASA knows that the CIA were actually looking at Mars from a very ancient perspective, and nobody finds out until the early 2000s when the files were quietly released, and it really was a case of them being released very quietly. And so, when you've got the CIA remote viewing Mars, well, the important question is, why did they choose to remote view it in the first place? I mean, it's not like, an agent of the CIA gets up and thinks, oh, I'm just going to remote view Mars tomorrow, In other words, there's a reason why somebody in the CIA wanted Mars to be remote viewed. And that's the one part of the story we don't know. We don't know why the CIA either did it on their own volition, or, if another agency asked them for help. We don't know. But it comes down to that important issue. Why did the CIA feel there was a pressing need to look into Mars?
Well, what amazes me about that is the fact that why did they feel that they needed to take the timeline back 1 million years?
Well, yeah, and that's an important thing as well, that it was a specific time frame.
Yeah.
And again, that suggests that somebody in the CIA knows more about Mars and its history than possibly even that NASA knows. And, and the reason why they were able to do that was because, it's extremely difficult for us to get to Mars, but if you're using the power of the mind in a psychic fashion, that could potentially, make it a lot easier.
Yeah. I just got this feeling, I got a feeling that there was more to it than earthquakes and meteorites, more like an attack, electrical.
You know what? I'll bring up some things that I've heard, some stories I've heard. I listened to a lot of old Art Bell shows. They always fascinate me, and having some of the past guests on, they're talking about, and there's always the subject of, was Mars murdered? Some people have equated the natural catastrophe that we call the flood, or what happened here 12,600 years ago when supposedly there was the worldwide catastrophe here. Some people have likened that it wasn't just worldwide, it was solar system wide. That something happened throughout the solar system that caused repercussions here on Earth with the flood. Possibly could have done something with killed Mars. There's one feature on Mars that I think fascinates me more than anything else, and that's the Valley Marineris. The Mariner Valley. I almost said marinara, like the sauce. But Mariner Valley, the Grand Canyon of Mars, when I look at the photos of that, what strikes me about that feature is that canyon is in almost a perfectly straight line, with a bulge in the center and then stretching out in a straight line. Now, of course, through erosion and whatnot, there's all these fissures and whatnot. If something hit it a long time ago, whether thousands or millions of years ago, but to me, it looks like something hit Mars. And whether...
Do you mean like some sort of big weapon and maybe something ricocheted out?
I think so.
Meteorite.
If it was a meteorite, I think it would take more of a chunk out. It looks like, if you want to say a particle beam weapon or something, I don't know. But, it could even be something related to the fact that, the planet that used to be in the space between Mars and Jupiter, which broke apart. There might be a lot of these types of phenomena that all happened around the same time. But that feature alone, when I look at it, looks so artificial that it seems like, it doesn't seem like an asteroid strike. It's not a crater. It's something that I can't explain.
Yeah, you're right, and it really kind of stands out. And again, I talk about this because you've got this situation of what looks to be, when you're talking about, going back sort of 12,600 years ago, and bizarre kind of destructions on the planet like Sodom and Gomorrah and all of this. You put all of this together, you can make sort of a strong case, but also a very incredible case that there could really have been some sort of war to war, so to speak, between not just rivaling Martians, but possibly Martians and advanced humans. Maybe even, another type of extraterrestrial as well. We don't really know, but I think, one of the interesting things about Mars is that for reasons we don't understand properly, I won't say everyone, but a lot of people kind of seem to have like an affinity to Mars, as if somehow, in our subconscious, we know there's some kind of connection. And maybe that connection wasn't a good one. Maybe it really was sort of a highly, destructive one. Who knows?
Well, I'm one of those people. I feel a very strong connection to Mars that I can't explain. There's something about the planet that just, it draws me, it fascinates me. And, I look at a lot of the photos that people post and a lot of the sites, and, 90% of the time when somebody's trying to point out a feature that, oh, look, I found this in a rover photo, I look at it and go, yeah, that's a rock. I mean, more times than often, it's a rock. But occasionally there is... Yes?
I might have an answer to that. If Nick agrees, do you think that the Martians came to Earth and seeded Earth?
I know there are... Go ahead, Nick.
Well, I do think there was a connection where Martians possibly did come to Earth. I don't think they seeded the Earth, but I think we could be looking at a situation where, if there was some sort of face-to-face, planet by planet war, I could easily see how they might flee to our world and settle here and set themselves up as, the big guys of the planet, so to speak. So I don't think they seeded the planet, but I think there is a good chance, and I talk about this in the book, of, sort of fleeing colonies making it to the Earth against all the odds, but surviving and realizing, hey, we can be the ones who sort of become the top dogs and take over and possibly be responsible for, the stories of the giants coming down and taking human women and things like that. I think all of that could potentially very easily tie in with these stories that, like the CIA picked up on, of these giants on Mars. You have to wonder, well, are they the same giants that are in the Old Testament? That they could well
Enoch. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Fallen angels. Yeah. See, Mark.
The Watchers.
You see, that's why you've got a fascination with Mars, because you're Martian.
Well, I do have the red hair for it.
Yes.
And all of that coming together, that I do believe that on that end of it, that possibly people from Mars came here to the Earth. And it's interesting when you mentioned that CIA did the remote viewing going back about 1 million years and what was happening. Because one of my things that I've been kind of hooked on for the last couple of years is the fact that our own Earth history is not what we're being taught and told. I think that there have been very advanced civilizations on this planet going back hundreds of thousands, if not maybe up to 1 million years older than what we think of as human civilization, which they think is like 6,000 or 7,000 years old. But, if you look at it like maybe the Martians coming here on the planet, they may have been the ones responsible for Atlantis or Lemuria before the devastation. In any case, I feel like a lot of this, we had these advanced technologies that came here, whether it came from the Martians or from somewhere else, built all of these Neolithic structures that we can barely replicate today. But then after this planet-wide or solar system-wide catastrophe, the knowledge seems to be lost, because as time went on, things got cruder and cruder until that knowledge was completely forgotten. Even Edgar Cayce talked about, the great sleeping prophet in his trance sessions, talked about people from Atlantis after the destruction fleeing to Egypt and helping to build the pyramids and whatnot. Could some of those people have come from Mars? I mean, it's a possibility.
Well, it is, and actually, I'm glad you made one point there, where an important point, where you said, the technology and the people, or the humanoids or whatever of that era, we've sort of lost the story, and I think that's an important thing. That we know that the ancients, were able to perform incredible feats, with moving stones and things like that. But we've kind of lost, the history and the means to achieve these things. And I think what this demonstrates is that how quickly, civilizations can vanish. Particularly in like if we had a nuclear war now, and if it was sort of a complete worldwide nuclear war, it wouldn't take long for civilization to collapse, and the next generation of kids wouldn't be able to speak properly. They certainly wouldn't be able to read or write. Survival would be the main crux of it all, and cities just destroyed. Imagine 10, 15,000 years after that, there will be just legends back, left over. So, I think that's a good point when you talk about, how today we've lost this and we don't know much really. If you go back into our history, in terms of civilization at least, we don't really know too much at all. A lot of it is kind of conjecture, you know. So, so again, you know, I could easily see how, you know, a fleet, if you like, of Martians coming to the Earth and looking to be, you know, the new leaders, so to speak, could easily be sort of changed over time as to into you know, sort of biblical gods, that kind of thing, and to the point then where we just don't have actually any real hard evidence. You know, we've just got, you know, sort of one story told to another person across generations and another generation, and then, you know, we're at the situation we are in now, you know, wondering what the truth about the connection between Mars and the Earth really is.
You know, somebody else I follow a lot and I highly respect is Brian Forrester, who does a lot of research into the old megalithic sites. I follow his YouTube channel, and you know, him talking about the ancient technology used to build a lot of these structures, and that, you know, that knowledge was lost over time. Even he shows how the Inca, and the older you get, the bigger the stones are, the more they're put together without the mortar and interlocked and look like they were machined. And then over time, it gets the quality gets less and less, and as the Inca come in and they just start stacking stones on top of it, it's smaller stones using mortar, and, you know, so yeah, that information is lost. Now, going back to Mars, where it looks like possibly there are pyramid-like structures on Mars with Cydonia and a couple of other sites, and some of these statues. We mentioned Egypt. There's another photo where it looks like tucked into this crevice in a canyon taken by the rover that looks like a gigantic Egyptian statue that looks like one of the sarcophagi standing up in this canyon. And it's a little hard to explain that away as pareidolia, like, you know, it's just really just a rock, because it looks so perfect. So there just seems to be a lot of evidence, not only for present life on Mars, possibility of vegetation. They definitely have proven that there is running water on Mars. You've seen some of the pictures where they show over a period of time between winter and summer near the equator how the water is running down the slopes and causing the slopes and the sands to be wet and then retreating when the weather gets warmer. And plus there's the trees, plus the possible old structures. So yeah, I definitely feel that there was an intelligent race on the planet in the past, and there may be something there today. I've always been, another one that fascinates me is the picture, the self-picture that the rover took, I think it was Discovery, took of itself showing its shadow, and it looks like there's somebody right next to the rover working on it.
Oh, yeah. That's strange.
You know which picture I'm talking about.
Yes, yeah.
It's
like very odd way. It does look like, you know, NASA wrote it off as saying it was actually a part of the rover itself, you know, but it doesn't really look like that. Like some of the other things don't really look like what, you know, we're sort of assured they are, you know.
Yeah, the thing
but
with...
You're right. Yeah. You're right when you said about, you know, all these structures. And what I find interesting more than anything else is that if you look at all these images and carvings, however you want to term them, on Mars, they all seem to be related to Egypt. For example, you don't find any structures on Mars that seem to be, let's say, ancient India style carvings, or let's say Celtic carvings, you know, or ancient Rome, or you know, looking like something similar to ancient Greece. For some reason, it all seems to mirror Egypt. And that's an important thing. If it was all just random, images that you might say, oh, that looks like sort of Roman sculptures, etc. But we're not getting that. Everything seems to be Egypt driven.
And that in itself is very fascinating because Egypt is not the oldest acknowledged civilization on this planet. It was the Assyrians. And the Assyrian culture was the first real civilization culture. Egypt came afterwards. In fact, a lot of the religious aspects of the Egyptians came from the Assyrians. Same as a lot of Judeo-Christian theology. Actually, there's a lot of it that's very related to the Egyptian religion. If the Hebrews came out of Egypt and they came out and started the book, with Genesis and the later books, the Exodus, there's a lot of what they incorporated into their religion came from Egyptian religion. So it's interesting that we're seeing these Egyptian-like structures on Mars, but nothing that looks like the Assyrians who came beforehand.
Yeah, and again, that kind of suggests strongly that, what we perceive as history is only part of history. It's kind of like the images that people have, of sort of Neanderthal man, you'd sort of taught at school, they're sitting around in a cave with a club and Mr. Caveman pulls his wife along, with his hair into the cave, that kind of stuff. It's sort of like almost sort of comical, simplistic imagery of how the ancients lived, when clearly they didn't. I mean, if you look at, for example, at Baalbek, where you've got the stone of the pregnant woman, which is in excess of around about 1,000 tons. And there's a couple of other ones in that area as well. One found not too long ago. Trying to move a gigantic stone of around about 1,000 tons. I mean, that's not really possible by our abilities today. Never mind way back then.
Let me ask you a question in your research on this book, because I know there's a lot of different theories and conspiracy theories about Mars and NASA. And I genuinely, my personal opinion, I genuinely believe most of the people who work at NASA and these scientists and engineers that are working on these probes and programs are, they're on the level. It's management. That's a different story. But yet there are a few things that they try to tell us, all the scientists try to tell us about Mars, that I kind of have difficulty with. First of all, and again, I'd like your opinion on this from your research, the atmosphere. They tell us that the atmosphere is so thin that it's, I think, 1% of the atmosphere we have here on the Earth. And yet, if that were true, if the atmosphere is that thin, then how is it possible that you can have these giant dust storms that blow so hard and stir up the sand that and sometimes can cover the whole planet? Or you see these dust devils swirling along the planet, which they've caught lots of photographs of. Then there's the fact of the spacecraft itself that we send there, everything from the rovers, Pathfinder, and these probes come through the atmosphere, and then they deploy a parachute. And in all the diagrams and animatics that they show, the parachutes look normal size, yet the atmosphere is supposed to be so thin, the parachute, to me, wouldn't seem like it would be slowed down enough, because there's not enough atmosphere and pressure there for it to cause friction enough to slow down a craft. Now they're talking about launching the next rover that's going to Mars, and the next probe is going to be a flying drone. So this drone will be able to fly over the Martian surface. But yet again, if the atmosphere is that thin, how is that possible? Because I don't know. It's not making any. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I was curious on your thoughts on that.
Well, I guess that actually is a really interesting issue or question. But I mean, I guess the only possibility to sort of answer that to some degree would be, when the craft themselves are actually sort of dictated as to where they land, by the computers. So in other words, when they're, when they sort of come down to the ground, they've got rockets, to a degree to slow them down, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a parachute with a huge rock just drop into the ground. They do have the ability to slow down. But that's an interesting aspect. To what extent, are they able to, slow down with the parachutes and so on?
Yeah, I've seen them that they've used rockets at the last minute, especially when the rovers, and they lower the rover, so the rocket platform hovers enough to lower the rover to come down. But in general, they still show the I believe, what was it, Pathfinder, which was filled like a big bouncing ball balloon, and it came down through the atmosphere and then bounced around and then deflated. But still, it came down on a parachute for a certain amount of time. And the parachutes, I seem to think, would have a huge issue capturing enough friction with air pressure if there's not enough air pressure in order to support it. Again, if somebody can prove me wrong on that and show me this is just my opinion, I just find it strange. I feel like there's a lot about Mars that is known in secret circles that is kept from us. I feel it does have a thicker my point is I feel it has a thicker atmosphere than they try to say. I also feel that a lot of the imagery that they show from the rovers on Mars is manipulated with red filters. I mean, I play around with Photoshop, and there are a few times where I'll see a picture that they'll send from the rover, and you'll see even there's pictures of the rover itself in the image, and then showing the skyline, and everything's all red. Everything is red. Even the rover looks red. And I immediately think that's a red filter. And I very easily go into Photoshop and do some auto correction. And when I do, it's amazing what happens. First of all, the sky turns blue. The colors of the American flag and everything become regular color. It completely lifts off that red filtering and makes it look like normal, regular sky and landscape and coloring. Which to me makes me think that a lot of these images are manipulated. Which is probably why a lot of times they're releasing a lot of black and white images rather than color these days. So I just feel that there's a lot that's being kept from us, and it sounds like a big conspiracy theory, but just like the history here on Earth, I think the history here on Earth is not what we've been told, and the same thing goes with Mars. There's the one thing with NASA. There's somebody coined the phrase, NASA actually means never a straight answer. So I feel like a lot of the information that comes from NASA is very questionable.
Well, I think one of the big problems is that, we're going to get the answers hopefully when we go there. And I think when that'll be, I have no idea. People have been, for the last 10, 15 years, have been talking about we'll be going in the next 10 to 15 years. And, I think it's going to be incredibly difficult to, take people to Mars in a situation which could be, sort of 15 months each way. I mean, that could be a tough kind of flight for, say, 3 or 4 astronauts cooped up, and I think, to get to the point, I think that is one of the reasons why, it's difficult to sort of figure out what Mars is really like until we actually get people there, but as you said, there are some, interesting aspects about the atmosphere and, the rate of the rovers, being able to sort of slow down, in a sort of, I won't say in an atmosphere-free world, but I mean, I think it's also important to sort of mirror it with the moon. The moon is completely free of an atmosphere, and yet, the lunar modules were able to sort of slow down and come to a sort of a fairly good landing. So I guess, it's going to be one of these sort of one person thinks this, one person thinks that until we really do get there,
Well, how far is it?
How far is it?
Well, it actually... it's actually it's a funny situation, really, when you ask people that, because the average distance is 140 million miles away from the Earth. However, it can actually get as close as 40 million. In other words, it's not like with our world and the moon. The actual orbit and the distance are incredibly different throughout the sort of the Martian year.
Plus, where both planets are revolving around the sun, and yet we're closer, so we go faster around the sun. But again, we could be on the other side of the sun at times from Mars, and then we come up along it and get close to it at times. And that's those launch windows that they look for, those times of year where Mars is closer and it's a shorter trip to launch spacecraft to get out there.
Yeah, you're right. And that's the one thing that is sort of in our favor, so to speak, the possibility of being able to make the trip, if you like, the journey, and do so at the point where at least, we can be at the closest time. And again, that might be tough to achieve as well, to make sure that, the times are okay and the distance and the directions and, it's not going to be an easy trip. And of course, you only need one person to get sick on the way, I mean, what are you going to do when you're 15 million miles away, and
you can hardly turn around and say, hang your head out the window, couldn't you?
There's a great series that just came out last month on Netflix. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, called Away, with Hilary Swank, which was about a voyage to Mars, and they tried to take a very realistic look at the journey. Now, the whole first season was about the actual journey to Mars, and in a couple of episodes, they covered things like that, with one person getting sick, another episode where the water reclamation and filtering system completely broke down, and all these different problems that they had during the journey, which was, very real problems. It's things that they're going to have to be very careful of. It's not just shooting people out there and waiting for them to arrive. There's a lot of time and distance, and plus, it's what they're going to arrive in. We can't just put, like we did with the moon, throwing a bunch of people into a capsule and then shooting them off. Having people being prone in a small confined space like that for months is going to drive them mentally insane and have a lot of physical problems as well. Now, you watch the movies like The Martian or even this series Away, the craft that they use to get there, I mean, is way more advanced than what we have in the International Space Station. These things haven't been designed and built yet, and it's going to take a long time to build something like that, to have enough space and breathing room and being able to work and not be that confined and cooped up like you're in a capsule for the whole trip. So getting to Mars is going to be very hard. But I like, like when Andy Weir, who wrote the book The Martian that they made into the movie, he was a NASA scientist. He was a NASA geek. He self-wrote this book, and he based it on real science, and it became a runaway hit. And but the way that they talk about sending materials to Mars like a year in advance of anybody going there, making sure that all the supplies they need and shelter and everything arrives first. Then when they know it's there and safe, then you send the people. So before we wrap up, one question I have for you, and I don't know if you covered it in your book, and again, this is on my list to pick up and read, are the moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos, which for any of the inner planets, it's the only other inner planet, solid planet, that has moons. And yet they're basically nothing more than asteroids, these potato-shaped asteroids compared to like what we have as our moon. And there have been speculation that they're one especially, I forget which one they talk about, it could even be artificial.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's actually a lot of weirdness surrounding the moons of Mars, which are Phobos and Deimos, and one of those, you point, they basically are, they look like little asteroids, which is what they are really, and probably broke away from the asteroid belt itself. I mean, when we talk about them being small, we're not talking about like our moon. You're talking about a moon sort of the size of like a city. We're talking about really small. Now, there's a couple of interesting things about this, about Phobos and Deimos. One of them relates to Jonathan Swift, who wrote the novel Gulliver's Travels. Now, what's particularly intriguing is that in the novel that was written, Jonathan Swift talks about the two moons of Mars, and bear in mind that the moons were actually not found until more than a century after Swift actually wrote the story. And this has sort of this has become sort of like a really interesting online debate now and again, to try and figure out how did Jonathan Swift know literally decades and decades and decades before he wrote it, before they were actually found, how did Jonathan Swift know that there were two Martian moons? And he actually wasn't that far off either in the story in relation to the orbit of the moons that he presented in his novel. So that's one intriguing angle. And there's another one on Phobos specifically, not on Deimos as well, but just on Phobos. There appears to be what looks almost like a monolith sticking out from the planet. And again, if you Google Mars monolith photograph, you'll see what looks sort of like a carved, almost like rectangular block standing out from the surface of Phobos. And again, it's difficult to reconcile that with just a random piece of rock or whatever.
Well, the fascinating thing, again, about Phobos and Mars in general is we have sent a bunch of different spacecraft to Mars that have mysteriously disappeared. We sent one specifically to explore Phobos, and as it was on approach to Phobos, just all telemetry, all signal, everything just vanished. And it's almost like somebody stepped in and said, no, we don't want you looking at this.
Well, that's one of the most popular theories for all that, all these various probes, the US ones and a Russian one, everything seemed to go wrong at the last moment, and everything went wrong, and catastrophes, lost all the footage, etc., etc. That is one of the most popular theories, the idea that there is still, a vibrant Martian civilization, and they took it on their own volition, I suppose, to ensure that we were not going to get there, or at least, in a manned fashion, so to speak.
There's also the possibility that there's nothing wrong with the spacecraft, and the plan all along was to say, yeah, we build this with public money, with NASA, in charge. We build this spacecraft, we send it out to go explore Phobos, and yet maybe there's something they already suspected about Phobos and they didn't want to make it public, because NASA, being a public agency, has to make all of their data public. But gee, wouldn't it be a shame if we say, oh, sorry, well, damn, we lost telemetry, we lost the craft. Well, I guess that's that. When in reality, the craft is working and taking a lot of pictures, and it's seeing things that basically they don't want us to see.
Yeah, there's sort of not multiple, but there's at least 2 or 3 different scenarios that have been put forward, to sort of explain all that. And again, it's one of those things with the sheer distance, it's really difficult to sort of pinpoint, a definitive answer to the, to what actually happened and why.
With these upcoming missions, it's going to be interesting to see, what survives, what's going to make it to Mars. All my little conspiracy theories aside, if they are successfully able to send this one drone probe that will actually fly over the surface, and that is something I would love to see. If any of the footage or photographs that they'd be able to take from an aerial standpoint, just a few feet to maybe 100 feet off the ground, would be very interesting. The other thing I find interesting is, when they originally took the photos of the Cydonia region with the face and the pyramids, it took NASA years to even go back there. There was all this controversy and all this excitement about it, and they never really went back. They came back a few years ago and showed some pictures, and we talked about this earlier, of the face, showing that it's really not a face. It's all this craggly mountains and whatnot. And yet they never really showed any close-up pictures of the 5-sided pyramid or any of the other so-called structures. They just showed a picture of the face to say, here, see, it's nothing. Now let's move on. And it's like, why wouldn't you want to try to study that in further detail? Just to at least say, hey, look, see, there's nothing here. Although, again, that photo of the face that they send out, it looks very Photoshopped to me, because the one thing they never took into consideration is the entire outline is very, not symmetrical is not the word I'm looking for. I guess it's symmetrical in a way, because if you start from the bottom, go to the top, it looks very unnatural. Looks like it was man-made. So maybe there was even if it was eroded to the point that it looks like that now, maybe it was a structure of some kind hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago, and erosion has taken its toll.
Yeah, and again, that sort of gets to the crux of the debate. Really, is that we're sort of limited, to sort of debate, over and over again, just 1 or 2 pictures, and no disrespect to people who sort of look into this, for years and years. The fact is, we still have just the same couple of pictures today that we had, back in the 70s, and then the couple more, when NASA sort of grudgingly went back to the area again.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that is one of the, I won't say it's a stumbling block, but it's, we're in a limited block, so to speak, in what we can find. It's not like, we're likely to get dozens and dozens of new pictures from Cydonia anytime soon. So it's work with what you've got and debate it to the extent you can, or, you move on. And a lot of people don't want to move on, and so, so we go round in rings sometimes, and, so we really need ways and means to try and, take it further. Maybe we should ask the CIA to remote view it again.
Well, before we wrap this up, let me ask you one final question.
Oh, I got one question too.
Okay, well, I'm going to let you, I'll be a gentleman, you answer.
Mine's a quick one.
Okay.
Is it true that a year on Mars is 2 of our years?
What you mean?
You mean a Mars year is 2 of our years here on Earth?
I'm not sure of the exact orbit, and as I said, it does actually change, but I'd have to look that up. I'm not sure on that.
I think it's roughly 2 years, or it's around that. Now, Mars does have almost a 24-hour day. The planet,
that's right, it does, yeah,
spins about as fast as the Earth does, even though it's a much smaller mass and body. The question I was going to ask you, Nick, is in all the research that you did for this book, what was the one thing that stands out that I think surprised you the most?
I think more than anything else, it was the sheer number of photographs that we've, that are now in the public domain. Everybody's heard of the pyramids and the face and, some of the other ones. But there's actually, a lot more anomalies as well. There's one that's known as the Twin Peaks, which looks like 2 pyramids with what looks strangely like something like the Sphinx in Egypt. It almost looks the same shape, but it's sort of shadowed. But it's clearly something that looks just like the Sphinx. And so I think more than anything else, it's if you actually go looking through all of NASA's pictures in the public domain, which a number of people have actually done, and it's like an incredible job. There are, a lot more really weird pictures, not just the ones that we've seen. And as I said at the beginning, you can sort of look at this from several perspectives. Some people say, well, NASA is hiding all this information from us. But then on the other hand, you have to admit, NASA are the people who are releasing all the pictures, so people either have to say that, NASA is hiding it or they're not, and if they are, well, then they can't be because they've let all the pictures out. Or, then you've got the angle of disclosure that, sort of a subtle, slow revelation by, well, let's release these pictures next week, and then 6 months after that we'll release these, and see how the public responds,
Okay. And do you think? Sorry, darling. Do you think that we will get to Mars in our lifetime?
In our lifetime, I'm honestly not sure because it really would be such a tremendous situation. It's not difficult getting to Mars. If you look now, we've collectively, from all the various countries that have sent probes, it's an immense number collectively. However, the big stumbling block is people. And, the probes that we've sent now, you've got the orbital ones, you've got the ones that, land on the surface, and then they start sort of trundling across the landscape for months and for years, without a hitch, really. So, the technology's there. The problem is, in relation to people, one of the problems is, as I mentioned earlier, somebody gets sick or two people get sick, et cetera, and there's not much you can do. And of course, there's the issue if you've got a large enough craft, but you're still going out there for say 18 months to 2 years, which is what it really could be, and you've got to do the same amount back. I'm not sure any of them would be in a full psychological state.
Well, what about the fact that maybe they're looking at Mars as another place for humans to go to if we carry on ruining our own planet?
If the what,
in case some sort of catastrophe happens to our own planet, are they looking at Mars as a second home for humans? Will they be putting robots up there to build accommodation for everybody and things?
Well, I mean, Mars, yet it has water, and it has ice, and it has a degree of atmosphere, et cetera, but, I mean, changing Mars, would be, I think, a long, long time away. I don't think, we could do that any time near. So I think, unless they can come up with some sort of propulsion system that allows us to go to Mars in a really quick time, sort of a couple of months, unless we could achieve that. If you imagine, even if you're just sitting, you're in a fairly large craft, and let's say there's 4 or 5 of you, which you would need a few people, and for 2 years each way, all you can do is see the blackness and the stars out of the windows, and you watch the same old movies for the last 6 months or whatever. I think one of the big stumbling blocks isn't the technology, it's the effects on people of doing something like that, It'd be the equivalent of being like in a prison cell, and not seeing anything or doing anything at all,
Plus, if the Mars environment is what they're telling us, I'll put my tinfoil hat away for a moment. You're dealing with an incredibly harsh environment. There's no oxygen. It's a very thin atmosphere to begin with, and extreme temperature variations, especially at night when it plunges down to like 100 degrees below zero. And that there's no magnetic field, so during the day you're getting the full blast of the radiation from the sun, where the Earth has a magnetic field that blocks the solar radiation and protects us. Well, Mars is not protected. So you have to make sure that any shelter that they have between their spacecraft and also anything that goes up, any type of shelter or habitat or whatnot, is also shielded from radiation. So there's a lot that's going to have to go into it, and I think it's still going to take us another 20 years or so before we may be in a position to send people, because I think some of those problems I don't think they have worked out yet. I mean, I don't think they even have... They have to first devise a craft that's going to be big enough and fast enough to get people there first.
It's just that I saw something on the telly where they were planting seeds in the same sort of earth that would have come from Mars, putting them into the same sort of atmosphere, and they were growing.
Well,
and if you can grow vegetation up there, then you can start changing the atmosphere, can't you?
Well, the nice thing about plants is most plants breathe carbon dioxide and release oxygen. Yeah. And that's part of something that Dr. Carl Sagan mentioned way back in the day, even his first Cosmos show, is one way to terraform Mars is like getting plants up there that would breathe in the carbon dioxide, release oxygen into the atmosphere to help make things more breathable. But again, there's still a lot of other problems with the thinness of the atmosphere. They'd have to make the temperatures warmer to melt the ice caps, to release a lot of the atmosphere that's trapped in the ice caps. So, yeah, there's a lot there.
Okay.
Well, Nick, again, we could go on this for a long time, but I think we should let people read your book. Now, where can people find your book, The Martians?
Well, you can get it pretty much everywhere. I mean, you can get it from Amazon, or you can get it off the shelves in Barnes and Noble as well. And it's called The Martians, subtitle Evidence of Life on the Red Planet, and published by New Page Books. And it's available in paperback, Kindle, Audible, and it's also available in a box set of CDs for people who still buy CDs. So.
I will say I did see that, and one thing I'm impressed with is that Whitley Strieber wrote the introduction to the book.
Oh, he enjoyed it. Well, he wrote a lengthy blurb. He hasn't actually done the introduction.
Oh, okay. Okay,
yeah,
I thought
he did do a really nice blurb that sort of really got to the crux of it, and he was sent a copy of it, and he called me up and really enjoyed it, and which was a good thing, and particularly from somebody like Whitley, sort of suddenly popping up and saying that. So
yeah, very nice.
Good of him to do that.
Well, Nick, thank you very much for coming on the show. This has been fascinating as always, and of course, we'll have to have you back when your next books come out.
All right. Well, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Irene.
Irene, you there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You're still there, Nick. Thanks a lot, Nick.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show again.
Okay, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another edition of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And, Irene, where can people find us?
They can find us everywhere.
Damn
Just
straight.
about everywhere. Don't forget Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts,
iHeartRadio,
Podcasts, iHeartRadio.
You name
everywhere.
it, we're on it. Okay, well, thanks everyone, and we will catch you all next week. Stay safe and have a good one.